panel this morning is Karen Chhour and the Minister for Children and Green MP Ricardo Menéndez. Mrch. Thanks so much for being with us, guys. Well, first of all, Ricardo, I mean, you were the one who actually asked the Minister to intervene in this case. You must be pretty pleased with this result for Prince and Jab.
Yeah, I'm really stoked that we've got this outcome. Tragically, there are so many families that right now are facing separation from their disabled children due to a long-standing policy that this government has actually made worse. No one should have to go through what Prince did. You can tell that she was suffering for almost a decade because of the separation, and so we're just really glad to be able to reunite them in the country.
So, Ricardo, is this precedent-setting, this decision? Because we hear all the time about how many of these cases get kicked back, essentially.
It's a positive precedent, and it shows that where there's a will, there is a way. We're now calling on Chris Spank, Erica Stanford and the rest of the government to stop discriminating disabled children who deserve to be with their families, many of them being the workers that we keep talking about wanting in this country to settle long term.
Yeah, so now your position on this is that you would scrap this policy of acceptable health. I mean, where do you sit on this, Karen?
Look, there are rules there for a reason. We have to make sure that when people are coming into this country, that unfortunately, and as sad as it is to say this, that they can add value to the country and not take away resources that are very limited at the moment, even for people who are currently here in our country.
But isn't that part of the problem? I mean, why don't we have the additional teacher supports in those classrooms to assist people like Jap so families can be reunited? I mean, it's not fair to sort of blame poor resourcing.
Look, I know Erica has had a huge increase in funding around that teacher support and that we are really focusing in that space to make sure that young people in classrooms do have the support that they need. That has been a focus for Erica in the education space and we're progressing quite positively there.
Okay, just so while we're on the topic of immigration, Ricardo, new rules to make it easier for skilled migrants to get residency here in New Zealand. Business community is very pleased about this. Where do you stand on it?
We support greater pathways to residency for migrants. The reality is that for too long we have created what we call a guest worker scheme, where migrants come on a few years and then they're expected to go back, and then eventually the business may want to attract them again after a few years later. It kind of doesn't make sense. What is concerning, though, is to see the coalition fighting over a pretty common sense policy, and we should be fighting against any political party whipping up anti-migrant rhetoric to just score political points in the way New Zealand First has done, and it's concerning the coalition does not seem to be on the same page on this.
Yeah, I mean, Shane Jones, Karen, told me on this program yesterday that he was worried about, quote, New Zealand being flooded with migrants.
Look,
do you support that sort of
I can't control what New Zealand First is saying.
Do you support that sort of rhetoric?
I actually wouldn't say that. I'm married to a person who came over here as a refugee and who has contributed to this country tremendously, and so has his family. We have to make sure that we are supporting skilled migrants to come here and to be able to lay their roots here and create families here and have stability here. And I think that this is a really positive step to bringing in those skills and also keeping skills from people who have been here for a very long time and contributed to this country. That's not something that I would say, but what I would also say is we do have the ability to pull the agree to disagree clause, and New Zealand First has done that.
It's pretty rare though, isn't it?
Yes, it's very rare, but New Zealand First has always spoken to this issue that way, and it's probably no surprise. But what I would say is we really do support and act, making sure that we are supporting skilled people who come into this country and really add value to this country.
Is there any evidence, though? I mean, one of the central arguments by New Zealand First here is that they're saying that, oh, well, when these migrants come in and they get residency, they then jet off to Australia. I mean, Ricardo, are you aware of evidence that supports those claims?
The data does not support that people who are coming here on some of these roles will just jet off to Australia. And I think if we want to make New Zealand a place where people want to stay, we could be doing things like supporting vocational education. We could be creating good wages in this country so that we give people a reason to stay. New Zealand First can't have it both ways, where they claim that we should be training New Zealanders first, while at the same time having a government that is gutting vocational education, one of the pathways to train people in trades that we're now having to attract from overseas. So if New Zealand wants to support people to stay here, they could be starting by fighting against the changes to vocational education that National has brought in, instead of just scoring political points and using terms like being flooded with migrants when they've got no evidence about what they're trying to back.
Yeah, I mean, very sort of politicised statements for sure. I mean, let's go on to the new holiday rules that were announced just yesterday, Brooke Van Velden. So, yeah, where do you sit on this? I mean, it means that, you know, part-timers essentially now have to accrue that time. They don't get the 10 days of sick leave straight up.
Yeah, look, it's a fairer system across the board. You earn your leave based on how much you work, and it actually simplifies the system for businesses to make sure that we can get the pay system right. This has cost our country a lot in the past, where this complex, complicated system with so many different ways of calculating how to pay out leave has ended up in court cases. So we want to make sure that it's simple, it's fair across the board to make sure that you are being paid based on how much you work.
Yeah, but there's some pretty big concerns from some of the unions. First Union, for example. I mean, Ricardo, what do you make of this? There seems to be some positives and some negatives, but where do you sit on this?
Yeah, let's make it clear. There's two different things: simplifying our leave system and then gutting sick leave for part-time workers. Effectively, all this will do, particularly for women, people coming off the benefit, and young people who are entering part-time work, they'll have less sick leave entitlement. They will be showing up sick to work, getting their colleagues sick. I can't see how that is useful productivity for an employer. And at the end of the day, no one benefits from having less sick leave entitlements, as part-time workers will now have under this change.
Hey, look, there's some positives there for women, and honestly, part-time workers can be male or female. This got nothing to do with women. Categorising people in that way when it comes to a fairer pay system based on how many hours you work is just ridiculous.
I just gave you
but
three
I would
examples
say the positives for females is now you don't have to wait to be paid at full rate for your holiday pay when you come back from maternity leave. That will start as soon as you come back from maternity leave. You'll be able to take that holiday pay at full pay. Casual workers will now be better off, and we'll also be calculating leave as you go, rather than waiting for that leave to be paid out at the end of the year, which is why sometimes when you get your holidays, you are usually paid a bit more. It simplifies the system to make sure that it's fairer for everybody across the board.
But you mentioned people, turning up to work sick because they don't have that leave accrued. I mean, I have heard claims that it could drive people onto the benefit. Do you agree with that sort of argument?
It could push people out of work, right? If you're feeling like you have to show up sick to work, you're not going to be performing as well. And, it's not just women who are affected. People coming off the benefit, the very same people the government talks about wanting to get off the benefit, often enter part-time work as their first step into employment. Despite all the spin from Karen around simplifying things, the truth is that this is gutting sick leave entitlements for part-time workers. When you're sick, you're not just sick part-time, you're sick for a whole day, and so it doesn't make sense to just gut sick leave for those people that are working less than 40 hours.
Look, they'll get the same amount as everyone else. They'll accrue it based on how much they're working. But what I would say is that this is a real positive for workers and for employees. We got heard over and over again, when that 10-day sick day came in for part-time workers, it made it really difficult for some business owners to make a decision whether to hire someone part-time or not, based on those 10 days sick leave. It added an extra pressure to employers. So this will actually create more opportunities for businesses to take on part-time workers and know it's not going to cost them in the long run.
Okay, guys, we've got to leave it there. Positives and negatives, thank you very much for joining me in the studio on Herald Now this morning. Chhour and Ricardo Menéndez, Mrch from the Green Party. Next, Donald Trump says paracetamol...